Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Paul.
Welcome all to Legends of the 70s podcast. Joining me today is a total legend, in fact, one of my favourite players. It is Mr. Peter Simon Barnes. How are you, sir?
I'm all right, thank you, Paul. Not enjoying this weather at the moment. It's raining up here in Manchester, but it's always raining in Manchester.
I was going to say, when did it ever stop raining in Manchester, Peter?
That's true, yeah.
Growing up in Manchester, what were your first football memories and where did you get your football DNA from? Because your dad is a very, very famous footballer that played in the FA Cup final in 1956 for Manchester City, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. I'm one of 5 kids. So, I've got 2 brothers, Keith and Michael. I think every kid growing up in the 60s, Paul, was football daft or cricket daft in the summer. And I think the World Cup, watching us beat West Germany in '66, I think I was about 9 years of age, and ball under your arm, you come rushing into the TV to watch the World Cup. And I think the game was, well, every kid was playing football in the street, gate post to gate post. There wasn't many cars in the roads then, so kids could play in the street, smashing windows and playing football and going down the park. And I think every kid wanted to be a professional football player, didn't they? So, I had a good DNA. My dad was a player, but he never pushed me into football. In fact, he probably didn't want us to be a football player. But I think every kid wanted to play sport, didn't they, in those days?
Absolutely, and every kid wanting to either be a pop star or a footballer, or the footballers wanting to be pop stars and the pop stars wanting to be footballers. You were born on the 10th of June 1951, so yeah.
57.
Oh, sorry, number 57, it's my right in there, 1957. So watching that World Cup as a young'un, you were really getting into football in them days. Was you aware of what kind of position on a pitch that you'd play, or was it just pretty much jumpers for goalposts in those days?
Yeah, I think it was more jumpers for goalposts. And I think when you're at junior school, I remember playing for my junior team. I was number 10 inside forward in them days, up and down. But I think it was later when I got in the Manchester boys team, under 11s and 14s, they put me out wide on the wing. Because I had a bit of pace and a decent left foot, that was it. That was my position. I thought, well, I like going past players. And I think growing up watching City, in those days, and it was like in Birmingham, but if you're a City fan, you'd watch City play one week, and you go to Old Trafford the next with your brothers and watch United play. And I suppose we were spoiled here in Manchester because, as you know, in the late 60s, you had Bestlaw, Charlton at United and Bell-Lee and Summerby at City. So, when I saw Summerby play, he was a great winger, and David Wagstaff, who eventually went to play for Wolves, as you know. And then, of course, United had Best and Willie Morgan on the wing, and I think I was just mesmerised by people who could dribble with the ball and go past people.
There were so many great wingers in those days.
Every team had them, Paul, didn't they?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, in 1966, England didn't. How did that impact? Because your dad, I'm reading your book, the Peter Barnes authorised biography on a Wing and a Prayer, written by Gary James. Your dad didn't seem very enamoured with Sir Alf Ramsey and the way he lined up. My friend Alan Hudson also maintains it was the worst day for English football because we won the World Cup without wingers. That was detrimental to us as a football nation.
Yeah, and he was successful, of course, as we know. He brought in Hurst and Peters, and the rest is history. And how could you leave Jimmy Greaves out of that team as well? Yeah. What a great player Jimmy Greaves was. But okay, they won it on home soil. We probably had the advantage at Wembley, and winning the game. And we've won nothing since. But I mean, I just think Dad was a bit of a purist. I mean, he played with 2 international wingers at City, and Roy Clark, who was a Welsh outside left, and Paddy Fagan, who was an Irish outside right. So, I mean, every team had them. Yeah. And I just think when I was growing up, I was just mesmerised. Even little Jimmy Johnson, who played for Celtic, I remember having trials at Leeds, and one of the nights we went to the Celtic Leeds game at Ellen Road, and this little Jimmy Johnson, redhead, with his socks rolled down, ran riot and ran Terry Cooper, who was a great left back for England. He ran him ragged on the wing, and Of course, Eddie Gray as well, who's Scottish international on the left wing for Leeds. I just think every team. I was just obsessed with seeing ball players who could run, and even that great Brazil team in 1970 with Jairzinho on the wing. Um, every team had good wingers because they provided crosses for the centre forwards, and most team had old-fashioned centre forwards who could head a ball and score goals. And I think that's what turned me on, was seeing people who could dribble with the ball.
Absolutely. We've spoken briefly about your dad, but talk to me about your father, because he wasn't born in Manchester, your mother was, but he was
Yeah,
born in my city, wasn't he?
he
Birmingham?
was. He's a bummer. He's born at St Andrews Road,
Yeah,
and he grew up in a place called Stetchford,
yeah.
Yardley, Glebe Farm, and I think he used to jump on 4 buses to get to Stafford Rangers, and that was his first club, Stafford Rangers, and he was obviously in the RAF as a young kid at Stafford, and then he got spotted by City watching him play for Stafford Rangers, and he got transferred, I think 1952, 53, and he was a great member of that City team. They lost to Newcastle in '55 because in those days there was no subs, and I think Jimmy Meadows, the right back for City, broke his leg, so they're only down to 10 men against the great Newcastle team of Jackie Milburn and that side in the 50s. But at least they got there the following year against his hometown, Birmingham, obviously. I remember him saying, God, he needed a coach, a charaban. I'd never heard the word before. A charaban. He had a charaban coming from Birmingham with all his family on this bus, and I bet most of them were going to support Birmingham City, not Manchester City.
And it was Kitts Green, wasn't it, as you've identified, Glebe Farm? I mean, my
Yeah,
my mother and my father come from that part of Birmingham, and if going to school in them days, he probably went to Audley Road School, which
I
was
bet
the
he did.
same school as my mother. So you've started playing football, you've watched the World Cup final. What age did you realise that your dad was like a really good footballer, and what kind of influence did? Because Ken was a chief scout at Man City, wasn't he, for
He
many a
was.
year?
It wasn't. It was Joe Mercer. It was old Joe Mercer, the manager, who brought him back.
Yeah,
My dad come out of the game. He was selling steel for Jack Walker, but it was Walker's
blimey.
Steel, the old Blackburn Rovers chairman.
Yeah,
And it was Joe Mercer that saw him one place and said he always got on well with Joe Mercer. And he said, Ken, you should be back in the game. Come back to City, and we want you back as trainer. So Joe Mercer brought him back to City when it was Malcolm Allison and Tony and Joe Mercer as manager, and he went reserve team trainer for 7 or 8 years, bringing the kids through. Then after running the reserves, he went as chief scout in the 80s, 70s and 80s, looking after all the kids and bringing all the kids through, which he loved doing. And there was no nepotism with him. He said, you got to stand on your own 2 feet. I mean, in
yeah,
fact, I was signing for Leeds as a kid. I'd had 13 trials for Leeds, being a 12-year-old boy, and because Don Revie was the manager who played for City in the
yeah,
50s with Dad. He wanted to sign me, and it was only Johnny Hart, another ex-City player who was on the coaching staff at City, said, Ken, you can't let him sign for Leeds. He's a City fan as a kid, and we've got to get him back here. So it was old Harry Godwin, who was my chief scout, who signed me as a schoolboy. And then I became apprentice. In those days, you could leave school at 15. And it was apprenticeship for 2 years. So when I left school at 15, I went automatically to City, signed apprenticeship for 2 years, and then on my 17th birthday they could sign you pro, and I signed pro forms on my 17th birthday, back in the day. So Dad never really pushed us into football. I think it was every kid what his dream was to play football, and there's no nepotism with Dad. He never got involved with my career. He gave me confidence, encouraged me to play, but he would have loved seeing Pep's teams today because he was a bit of a purist. My dad, he
yeah,
wanted total football and skillful players and entertaining football. That's how he was brought up. He was a schemer, of course, a half. In those days, he was a right wing halfback. But everything started through him because the great German goalkeeper Bert Trautmann, who was a prisoner of war after the Second World War, he was a great keeper. He used to catch it and throw it out to my dad, and my dad had set the team rolling and try and thread balls through to Bobby Johnston and Don Revie to score goals. So Ken was like the David Silva or the Grealish of Man City in those days. He was a provider of goals.
And Bert Troutman broke his neck in that 56
He
final,
did.
didn't he? And still
He did.
played on an incident where Peter Murphy come in and I think his leg collided with his neck.
That's
And
right.
it was
That's
after the
right.
game that they realised that he'd broken his neck. So you've gone to Manchester City as a kid. What were the
Yeah.
other apprentices like in those days? What were those days like? I mean, they were great,
Oh,
great days, early
well,
70s, weren't
yeah. You learn the trade well. I mean,
they?
you go in 2 weeks before the season started. You end up painting the stand and brushing the tunnels down and doing jobs. And you had different jobs to do, like cleaning the boots and going and getting the kit in the morning and putting the kit in the first team dressing room. For the first team and the reserves. You had to knock on the door in them days,
Yeah.
Paul. You get the kit and knock on the door, and you go in there with Colin Bell and Mike Summerby and Mike Doyle and Joe Corrin. And it was just respect. You called them
Yeah.
Mr. Lee or Mr. Bell, never by their first name. And you learnt your trade well, and you wanted to get in that changing room as a kid. You thought, oh wow, look at all these great players in the changing room. And it was part of the apprenticeship. Now there's nothing like that now, is there? They're all carried about. They've got academies. And you learnt your trade well for 2 years as a kid, and you wanted to become a pro, and that was how you learnt it.
Absolutely. I think that the kids have too much too soon
That's
these
right.
days. They don't learn the trade. They don't have that
No,
respect. They don't
it's not
want to
their
see.
fault. It's just the way the game is, isn't
Absolutely.
it, Paul?
Yeah, they're just products of the modern day. But as you say, in your day, Peter, it was so different. You've
And
got
it was simple, wasn't it? You played in the
yes, it
B
was.
team under.
Yeah,
You had the B team, the A team, the reserves, and then the first team. And what I liked about whoever did away with the Central League was a joke because,
yep, agreed.
when you played in the Central League, you knew you were going to play at Main Road on a Saturday at 3 o'clock. When the first team was away, and you learnt your trade by playing in the B and A team, and you wanted to get in the reserves. I was lucky to get in the reserves at 17, and then I got in the first team at 18 years of age, so it was a progression. But, I was very lucky to play with some great players like Glenn Pardo and Alan Oakes, and we learnt the trade off these older players that used to speak to you in the changing room, and it was a wonderful experience.
Your debut for Manchester City, I nearly said Man
Yeah.
United, then was against Manchester United. Didn't you come on as a sub for Glyn in a
I
League
came,
Cup game?
you're right. I came on as sub for Rodney Marsh, I think it was, who came
Okay.
off, and a League Cup game. We lost 1-0. It was a handball by Jeff Clark, a centre half, and Jerry Daly, who played the Irish international, played for United at the time. He scored the penalty, but it was amazing coming on Old Trafford in front of like 55,000 people. I thought, Christ, I can't even hear. You can't shout for the ball. It's too noisy.
Mm.
But it was great coming on against United and a baptism of fire. And then I think I made my home debut against Luton Town at Main Road, and then my away debut against Burnley. Old Keith Newton was a right back, and I remember him saying to me, "I've heard a lot about your son." He says, "Don't play too well today because I put you on the track."
And he wasn't joking, was he?
No, and well, there was tackling them days, Paul. Wasn't there? You could tackle
Yeah.
people.
Tommy Smith, did you come up against Tommy much?
Oh yeah, well, I kept out of the way of Tommy because we all knew about Tommy Smith, but he'd come over and try and kick you, and he'd kick you and say, "Welcome to Anfield, Peter. Do that again, and I'll snap you in half."
And that was his standard line. And again, he wasn't
That's
joking, was he?
No, he wasn't joking. That's how he was.
Yeah.
Welcome to Anfield.
Mm. Central League, you spoke briefly about that. Can you remember your first time that you played reserve team football and, how ready did you think you were? And then when you come up against some of those senior pros coming back from injury,
Yeah,
how did you look at it and think, geez, I've still got a bit to learn?
yeah, it was great coming into the Central League team at 17 and getting a taste of it. But you were playing against internationals of
Yeah.
other teams. Like if I played Derby, you're playing against Roy McFarland or Alan Hinton, and different players, and you think, God, I'm playing against international players here. What a baptism of fire it was coming into that team in the Central League, and it was great just to get on the pitch and play on Main Road, which was a good pitch, big wide pitch. It was good for wingers, and we had a great groundsman at the time called Stan Gibson who looked after the pitch well, and just to play in the Central League team was great. You're learning your trade against international players, and I think the Central League was great because you're rubbing shoulders with international. I remember playing with Dennis Law when he come, he got a free transfer from United back to City where he'd started. And So Dennis Law played with my dad in the 50s. He
Yep.
was my dad's best mate, and he's playing with his best mate's son at Anfield. I'm playing with Dennis Law, and he's like 34 years of age, and I'm 17. So what did Dennis Law think? He's played with his dad, and he's playing with his son. It was incredible to play with Dennis Law in the reserve team,
Again, what a player Dennis was, and
Mm.
what an education. And it was part of your education. Also, part of your education was playing for England. You played youth level, you played
Yeah,
under 18s, didn't you? You played for
yeah,
what would be then the 23s, and certainly you
yeah.
played 22 games at full international level, scoring
I was
4 goals.
lucky. Yeah, I mean, under 18s, we won people forget we won the Mini World Cup in Switzerland in '75, and I think Ray Wilkins scored the winning goal against Finland. We beat Finland 1-0 in the final in Bern, and then progressed to the under 21s. I mean, that team was full of players you'll know: Paul Bradshaw, the Wolves keeper,
Yeah,
Laurie Cunningham on the right wing, Brian Robson, Peter Reid, Glenn Hoddle was a year younger than me, so he was coming through. Alan Kirbishley, West Ham, myself, John Dean up front, Villa,
yeah.
Tommy Langley, Chelsea. Steve Wicks at the back, Ray Wilkins, of course, the captain in midfield. So all was coming through, and then me and Ray Wilkins really progressed to the full England team when Ron Greenwood took over in 70,
7.
77, yeah, 76, 77. Ron Greenwood took over from Don Revie, and he wanted to change it, Ron. It was nice because he put me and Steve Coppell on the wings with Keegan and Bob Latchford, who come in for his debut against Italy, and not many teams have beaten Italy. That was a great side. We beat them 2-0. I mean, it was a World Cup qualifying game at Wembley in '77. We're not going to beat them. We had to beat them 6-0. No one's going to beat Italy 6-0. But we beat them 2-0, and I had a great debut against Claudio Gentili again, that dirty fullback who played for Juventus. And I mean, they had 7 players in the Juventus team that played for Italy. And, like Franco Baresi and up front, Roberto Bettiga, um, uh, Marco
Franco
Tardelli.
Causio as well
Yeah, what a
would have been
player, the
playing.
right winger,
Yeah.
Franco Causio, Marco Tardelli. They were a great side, and then to beat them at Wembley 2-0, it was a great debut for me and Coppell. And we went and beaten them for 11 games with Greenwood playing with 2 wingers and playing attacking football, which was refreshing to watch in those days.
Again, at that level, Ramsey didn't have the wingers, Don Revie didn't have the Mavericks, and Ron Greenwood brought
That's
back the
right.
wingers and brought back some Maverick players as well. I think that was the game that cemented him to be the England manager when we beat Italy in '77,
Yeah,
2-0.
yeah.
Growing up, going back to when you were growing up, who were your heroes? Who did Peter Barnes, when you walked over that white line, whether it be your school or your Sunday team or Manchester City, Leeds United on trial, who
Yeah.
did you think you were in that boots? You weren't Peter Barnes, who was you?
My idol, well, even though I was a City fan, Paul, my idol was George Best, I think.
Yeah,
Through my brother Keith, who was older than me, he was a big United fan, and he idolised George Best. And I think just watching the way he dribbled with the ball and his balance on the ball, he could beat people. And watching him play for Northern Ireland and Man U, everybody wanted to be George Best, didn't they, in those
yeah,
days, growing up? And he could do anything with the ball. And I think I just wanted to even, I used to go when I'd seen him play on TV, I'd get the ball and go in the garden and try and copy his dummies where he'd dummy with his hips and go the other way. And he had great balance. And I think every kid wanted to be George Best, with the ball. And he was a massive idol of mine. And I just wanted to, I just love watching him play for Northern Ireland and United, of course. But anybody could run. Don Givens, Charlie Cook, Chelsea, Willie Johnston,
yeah.
West Brom. Every team had good wingers who could dart past people and get balls, get good crosses in. You don't see many wingers cross a good ball today, do you?
I don't think you see really many natural wingers. I mean, on the podcast so far,
No.
we've interviewed Story Moore, Don Rogers, Terry Curran, Eddie Gray, and Tommy Hutchinson. All fine wingers,
Yeah,
great players. And I don't think there's a greater sight in football than seeing a winger going past his back and
yeah.
delivering a ball. I mean, John Robertson was another favourite
He
of
was
mine.
brilliant. Yeah, and mine. John and Tony Morley at Villa.
Yes.
Um, Leighton James at Burnley, and
Dave Thomas
Stuart
as well.
Barrett, Dave Thomas, Barrett. Every team had him, and
Yeah.
Don Rogers at Swindon Town, he was
Mm.
exciting to watch.
Yeah.
As I said, Charlie Cook, Alan Hinton, Keith Weller, Leicester.
Mm.
Every team had him. Who someone could just one-on-one go at people, take them on, get a penalty, get to the byline. You don't see it now because it's all possession.
Yeah, it is.
Come out and they go back to the fullback or back to the centre half. It's all 5-yard balls to each other. Whereas in those days we went forward, we'd have got whistled at passing the ball back to a goalkeeper or a fullback because that was your job in the top third, one-on-one, to try and get past somebody and get crosses in for the centre forwards in the box.
Absolutely. I remember Tony Curry saying to me, I don't think I ever played the ball sideways or backwards.
No.
It was always a pressing forward pass.
That's right. He was
And
a
that's
great
the
player,
way that,
Tony.
yeah, that's the way players were brought up
Yeah,
in
we had to get
those
forward.
days.
It wasn't about possession or going back to the keeper. God, can you imagine in our day, we'd have got to the penalty area and then ended up back to the goalkeeper. We'd have got whistled off the field, wouldn't we?
Yeah, Birmingham done that quite a lot.
But you'd have got whistled off the park, wouldn't you, doing that?
They did. Trust me, they did. If you could replay one game that you played during your career, Peter, what game would it be and why?
I think possibly Chelsea at home. We beat Chelsea 6-2 at Main Road, and they gave me 10 out of 10 in the papers the next day. And I think everything I did that day come off for me. And they had a lad called Graham Wilkins playing right back, who was Ray Wilkins' brother.
Yeah.
And I got him sent off in the first half an hour of the game. He's trying to kick me, and the referee sent him off. And then his brother Ray, who was my teammate at England, went to right back to mark me.
Oh.
And he said, Marnes, you go past me, I'm going to put you. I says, Ray, you'll have to catch me first, son. But they gave me 10 out of 10. I'd never got 10 out of 10 before in the papers. And it was Chelsea, I think, because I think I'd scored 2 goals and made 3. We beat Chelsea 6-2 at Main Road. And, it was an exciting game.
You enjoyed playing against London clubs, particularly Tottenham Hotspur. I mean, there's a couple of games on YouTube I've been watching recently. That great goal that you scored, you took it down the left and smashed it in the top corner. And then another game where you sat Pat Jennings on his backside and just dinked it over him. Talk me through those.
I used to like playing against the London teams, probably because I'd always have a good game against the right backs, and it was, I think, Steve Perryman in them days and John Pratt on the right. But I just like going to London, I think, because it was the capital probably, and trying to express yourself against good teams. But, Pat Jennings, they always show that goal at Main Row when I came inside the centre half and went to dummy Pat, and he dived down and just dinked it over him into the empty net. But, I think it was just, I enjoyed the matches going to London and playing against Chelsea and Arsenal and Tottenham,
And also, they would have been on Match of the Day, wouldn't they? Because those were the glamour clubs. Man City, of course, were a glamour club as well. So, it wasn't like in our day, it's just the top. Well, everybody gets on Match of the Day now. But in those days, the cameras would go to a couple of grounds. And you must have, as a player, been more excited as well because TV games were only highlighted formats, not full games that we see today. Only, of course, the cup finals.
That's right. They'd only show the highlights, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Even ITV, with Yellow Sinstad and Granada TV, you just get the highlights and games on a Sunday afternoon. But no, I just think it was next. I was lucky to come into a good team with, Summerby and Brian Kidd and Joe Royal and the great Colin Bell and Asa Hartford, of course, who played for the Baggies. He played for West Brom. We signed him from West Brom, and I've coming into a good team with some good players and who'd won everything in the late 60s, like Mike Doyle, Tommy Booth, Glenn Pardo, Alan Oak. They were seasoned pros who'd won everything in the late 60s. When they won the FA Cup and the league in '68, they'd won everything in the late 60s. So to come in with them fellas, I looked up to them, and you learn more by talking to them about the game, and it was a great experience coming into that side.
It's all part of your football education, and as you say, when you're in that and you're swimming and you're talking and you're in the dressing room and you're going away with them players, you just can't help but learn, can you?
No, and they spoke to you. You didn't need the manager to learn you things or the coach in them days. You learnt off your pros you played with. And they'd tell you what to do. They keep taking them on, Peter. Don't be frightened of losing it. Don't worry. Keep having a go at the fullback, get crosses in, or I'm always available to play a 1-2 with inside you. You know, you learn more of talking to the players than you did of talking to the manager.
Still a teenager, you scored the first goal in the 1976 League Cup final
Yeah,
game against Newcastle, and I believe that year you was also voted Young Player of the Year. That must have been a great year for you, Peter.
it was coming into that team. I was only 18, and of course the League Cup was only played end of February in those days.
Yeah.
So I was 18, and I think it was the first match my mother had been to. She didn't like watching me play because she thought she was frightened to see me get injured, you know. And so my dad took her to the final, and of course, to score the first goal after 11 minutes at the City end, where all the City fans were, it was a great feeling to run behind the goals and celebrate as a Mancunian lad growing up, you know, against Newcastle. So of course, probably I got my own back for my dad because he'd lost in the FA Cup in 56, 55, and we won the League Cup against Newcastle in 76. So
Yes.
20 years on, I got my own back for him to beat Newcastle in the final, which is ironic, really. But and then of course Dennis Stewart scored a great overhead kick, and then we beat them, and then. The Newcastle fans, I remember, were great. They gave us a clap. They clapped us around the pitch in those days. A lot of respect for Newcastle, who clapped us around the pitch. And then the next day, I made a mess of my speech, but at least I won the Young Player of the Year award in the hotel, and it was nice to get that trophy as well on a Sunday evening. You know, so it was a memorable weekend that in '76. Yeah.
Fabulous. Luckiest or unluckiest grounds that you played on during your career?
Luckiest, I'd probably say Tottenham. I used to always
Yeah.
score at Tottenham. Unluckiest ground, probably Anfield. We never got much at Anfield. They were a good side in the '70s. I mean, we were lucky to finish runners up in '77 to Liverpool. You know, we should have
Yes.
won the league. We should have won the league in '77. We finished runners up to Liverpool. Probably we never got much there at Anfield, but of course they had the great side in the '70s at Liverpool, didn't they? You know, with
Oh,
Souness and
yeah.
Dalglish.
Yeah.
But I mean, to finish runners up to them, we'd done well, really, to finish, runners up to Liverpool.
But in the 70s, there was a cluster of teams that won the
Oh,
Football League Championship. Everton being the first in 1970 and Liverpool being the last in 1979. But it changed hands many a time.
yeah,
And some great teams. Your likes of Ipswich Town were very much bridesmaids, never
yeah,
the bride. Stoke
yeah,
City were a great team. Derby County won it twice.
yeah.
But it
Aston
was
Villa,
scattered. Yeah,
Aston Villa.
it was all
I think that
scattered
was.
around.
I think you had so much competition. Every
Yes, you
team
did.
had good. Every
Yeah,
team had good side. You know, Villa.
yeah, yeah.
Always difficult going to Villa Park, and Wolves. Every team had good sides, and
Mm.
that's what made it. Every year you could never count who's going to win the league. Not like today, whereas in them days it was Villa or Ipswich or City, Liverpool. Every team had a chance of winning the title because there's so many good sides around in them days. I think, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, I mean, they harp on about this is the golden generation, and before it was the golden generation, and before that it was a golden generation. My golden
Yeah,
generation is the 70s. I
I
think
think
that
so.
we had the best players, we had the best of everything in the
I
70s,
agree with
in
you.
my opinion.
And that Notts Forest team that Cloughy had,
Oh,
John, as you
yeah,
just mentioned, Peter with John Robertson,
yeah,
on the wing, and John O'Hare, Archie Gemmell, the good sides. Every team had good players and all British and Irish players as well, Paul.
absolutely. And we owned the European Cups as well in those days, didn't we?
Yeah, yeah. And the competition was so good. It was never easy going anywhere to play.
No,
But I mean, you could say one of 8, 9 teams could win the league, couldn't you? Because they were
absolutely.
so good. They were
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah, on the podcast I do with Terry, the Current View, we went through it the 1 week. I think we named about 12 teams that during the 70s could have feasibly won the Football League Championship. It was so
Yeah.
open. Who was your most difficult opponent during your playing days? Who did you find a difficult one to get past?
Um, One who was very quick. You could go past him, but he'd come back and get at you again. It was always the little fullbacks with low gravity.
Yeah,
Um, Paul Reaney was a good player at Leeds.
yeah,
He was quick, but if you try to push it past him, you might go past him. But he'd turn around so quick and get back at you. And it was those sort of fullbacks who were quick and tenacious. It wasn't the big clumsy ones you could turn inside out and stick it through the legs and go round them, but it was the little ones who were quick. getting back at you. Mickey Mills, Southampton, Ipswich, but ones who are low gravity, because all the good fullbacks nowadays were short and quick and low gravity to get back at you.
He wasn't
I
called
say
Speedy.
Paul Reaney was a good player, yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't called Speedy Rooney for nothing, was he? Paul
No,
Rooney, one of the
no,
greats. And as you say, all teams had great fullbacks, great inside forwards. They just had
yeah.
great players and great teams. Great goals that you scored, Pete. What was your favourite goal during your career that you scored? What?
I think one of them was at Tottenham.
Yeah,
I also chipped Pat Jennings when he played for Arsenal. He come to Main Road. It wasn't televised, this game, not like the Tottenham game was. And he come out and dinked the ball over his head and he chipped him into the far corner. Um, I'd say that one would have put Pat Jennings on his backside against Tottenham at Main Road when we won 5-1. That one. Um, I didn't score enough goals. I was a good assist. I'd made lots of goals, but not scored many goals.
this is the thing. People get obsessed with numbers these days. When you're a winger, you're more a goal provider than a goal taker. Yeah, you scored a few goals, but your job pretty much is to beat your fullback, get the ball over, and give the
Yeah,
ammunition for the central strikers, isn't it?
exactly. And I think uh, my best stats for 2 years probably West Brom when I played for the Army. I think I
Yeah.
scored nearly 30 goals in 2 years. I know I was a penalty taker, but I think I'd got 14, 15 goals a season, which ain't bad for a winger in those days. Because that was an attacking-minded team as well. With Bomber Brown up front and Cilla Regis. We had Brian Robson in midfield with Moses and Gary Owen. It was a good side that the Albion team I played in.
But again, a great manager. Big Ron was a manager that would like to
Yeah,
play front foot football and was a very charismatic guy, wasn't he, Ron? Both on
yeah,
and off the pitch.
yeah. You wanted to play for him because he wanted you to express yourself, and
Absolutely.
he wanted entertaining football and score goals. And it was nice coming into that team because we were so attack minded. Brendan Batson and little Derek Statham, I thought should have played for England, the left back. He was good coming. He'd go past me on the overlap, and I say, "Hey, get behind me! I want the ball." But he was like a Terry Cooper going
Yeah, he
past
was.
people and putting crosses in himself, Derek. And it was an attacking-minded side.
He was a fabulous fullback. But again, the Albion had a fantastic side. That Manchester City team was a fantastic side. An absolute shocker that Peter Barnes is sold in 1979
Yeah,
at the age of just 22. I mean, Malcolm Allison had
yeah.
come back and seemed to,
Decimate the team, Paul.
yeah,
Yeah, it was
leave his
frightening.
brain elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, he was. I think you talked to the older 60 team. He was a great coach with under Joe Mercer.
£100.
Joe was the brains, and Malcolm was a bit of a flash Cockney
Yep,
character, a good coach in his own way. But he come back the second time when Tony Buck was the manager. Tony was a good manager, but a little bit quiet. And don't forget, it's like your mentor coming back. He brought Malcolm back.
yep,
He brought Tony Buck back from. He brought Tony Buck from Bath City to play for Manchester City as a player when he was nearly 30 years of age.
yep.
And Tony won everything that last 6, 7 years of his career. But that team that finished runners up to Liverpool didn't need tweaking because they say don't change it if it's working. And he sold me and Gary Owen to West Brom. He sold Dave Watson, the current centre half for England,
Yep.
to Werder Bremen. He sold Asa Hartford and Brian Kidd to Everton. And he sold Joe Corrigan, the keeper, to Brighton.
Yeah.
But to get rid of 6 internationals,
Mm.
and then he was just he decimated the team that I think could have gone on for the next 5 or 10 years with a great mix of youth and experience coming through. We were there to go and probably win more trophies, but it was just decimating. The fans could never understand what happened then because to get rid of 6 of your best players, like you said, I was only 21. Gary Owen was only 20.
Mm.
And with the future youth team coming through, Malcolm had his own way, and the club should have not listened to him. But I think he put the club back about 10 years.
I think he did. It's quite incredible when you look back at what he actually did and players that he moved out. He also brought in Steve Daly. I think Mick Shannon was another one that was sold,
Yeah,
wasn't he, by Malcolm Allison? But he brought
yeah,
in Steve Daly, and he spent a lot of money on certain players as
yeah.
well, didn't he?
Mike Robinson from Preston, who was in the third
Absolutely.
division. I think he could have got him for 300,000. He ended up
Yeah.
spending £700,000 on him.
Mm.
Steve Daly thought he was coming to a team with me in it, and
He
Gary
did.
and all these lads. He said, "Oh, you're coming to join Peter Barnes, Gary Owen, Dave What?" He said when he signed for City, it'd all been sold.
Yep.
And it sold him down the river. Really, I felt sorry for Steve Daly because he was a good player, but the team was just being messed about and sold down the river.
Because he did ask Malcolm whether, with him signing, players had to be sold. And Malcolm's answer was, no, we don't need to sell anybody. And as
Yeah,
you said, he did. And
he did.
he really was thrown in at the deep end. And he took a lot of stick. Steve
I think
Daly,
so.
great lad as well, isn't he, Steve
Yeah,
Daly?
lovely. I always
Mm,
have a laugh with him when I see him. He says, because he's on the afternoon circuit now. He
yeah,
says, Pete, when I signed for City, I thought all you lads were not going to leave the club, and when he signed me, you'd all been sold.
yeah.
And he thought, what am I coming to here? The 5 or 6 of the best players have been sold already. And so the team was restarting up again, and it took a long, long time to get back to normality.
It did, and sometimes teams don't recover from selling so many brilliant players. But 1979, it was a great year for music. Peter, you're very much a music man, aren't you? Talk to me
Yeah.
about what Peter Barnes done off the pitch in those days.
Well, I used to like going to the gigs, like watching Rod Stewart and
Yeah.
David Bowie was one of my favourites. Saw Bowie 2 or 3 times in the 70s. Elton John. It was great for music, wasn't it?
Oh
And
yeah.
I remember one day was me and Gary were both playing for West Brom, and we went to Bingley Hall in Staffordshire to watch. It was pouring down this night. We went to watch ABBA
Right.
live, and we got invited back to the changing room after the gig.
Right.
I thought, good God, someone that recognised it. Would you come back to meet ABBA in the changing room? You're joking, aren't you? So we went back, and she was wearing the dark one, a number 9 Wolves shirt with Andy Gray on the back.
Good grief.
We went in the changing room and met the 2 husbands and Benny and Bjorn, and it was nice. I had a glass of champagne with them. I thought, God, we've got into the changing room to meet ABBA. I mean, not many people have done that.
I mean, what a great band they were, wasn't they?
They
Again,
were,
we had great bands about in those days. We had a great culture. We had great clothes. We had great. Everything was vibrant and
yeah,
fabulous in those days. The dressing rooms were also vibrant and fabulous. Who were the
yeah.
characters in those dressing rooms that you went
Oh,
to?
well, I mean, he was a character. He's a bump into him a lot. Frank Worthington,
Oh,
God bless him. What a player Frank was with his his armbands on, and he thought he was Elvis Presley, Frank,
he
didn't he?
did. Yeah, he did. Yeah,
And he
yeah,
was he was not the maverick like Tony Curry and Alan Hudson. That he could do anything with the ball, Frank. And I had a chance to play with him. He came on loan to Leeds when it was too late. We'd gone down because after West Brom, I went back to my second team I loved, which was Leeds, and we got relegated the
mm,
first year. And Frank came to join us, but Alan Clark had signed him too late, and he was a great maverick to play with. Frank, great player.
great to go out for a drink with as well,
Oh,
wasn't he, Frank
He'd
Worthington?
had some gear. He used to go out in his leather pants and his t-shirts, and he was like a magnet for women when they went in the nightclub, wasn't he? Like
Yeah.
larger than life, Frank, like Elvis Presley, I think. But what a great player as well.
Oh, tremendous. What's the best bit of advice that you were given, Peter, during your career?
Um, I think just to enjoy the game, to play with a smile on your face,
Yeah.
go out and play, and don't be too negative. I could never be negative. I mean, I was a winger, so I had to get the ball and try and beat people and be entertaining. And I think it was just to go and enjoy yourself. Nobody ever coached me in my day. It was all natural ability. My dad never give. Someone said, "Oh, didn't
Mm,
your father coach you?" My dad never coached me in my life. He just wanted me to go and enjoy my game
yeah.
and play. He just go. All my dad had said to me was, "Go and take them on, get the ball and take people on." And that was the best advice I got because that's all I wanted to do is beat people.
Mm,
It wasn't. To me, it was more fun nutmegging players, you know, dribbling past players and sticking it through the legs and entertaining and getting a good cross in for a striker than scoring goals myself. It was, 1-on-1 to beat people. That was my job to get to the byline and put crosses in.
absolutely. 19 years your career spanned. Um, 25 clubs that you played for, eight different countries. The first
Yeah.
country that you went to was Spain. You Real Betis after Leeds United. Talk to me about that period.
Well, it was '82, yeah, just
Mm,
finished league. We got relegated. I think what upset me so much because I got relegated with Leeds. I never made the '82 World Cup squad, and
yeah.
Ron Greenwood had left me out because of my form at Leeds, and we got relegated. He said, "Pete, I've got some advice. It's not done you good. Your form playing for Leeds, a bit defensive minded. Get yourself away from Leeds." And I was a bit gutted to be left out after 5 years of playing for England. And this agent rang me up and just said, "Would you like to go and play in Spain?" I said, "What's the team called?" She said, "Well, Betis and Seville." I thought, well, I'll go and have a look. And I took my wife out then for a week, and it was a great city. And I thought, Christ, if I come to Spain, it's technical football, it might suit my style. And I'll be playing against Diego Maradona at Barcelona and Bernd Schuster and, all Hugo Sanchez at Real Madrid and Stilica. And I thought, well, yeah, I'll have a bit of that. And it was a great experience going out to Spain and playing at all these great stadiums.
You also played in Portugal, in Malta, the Republic
Yeah,
of Ireland, Tampa Bay Rowdies,
yeah,
Clifton Villa Northern Ireland, and Wrexham. Um,
yeah. My dad's
some
old
great
team.
clubs there. Yeah.
I think, well, if I count all, it wasn't really 25 clubs, Paul. It's probably six, seven
Yes,
clubs
a
I had
couple of them was
with
duplicates.
contracts.
Yeah,
Yeah, with contracts.
yeah,
I
yeah.
just jumped from club to club because
You
I
wanted to play.
also I also beat passionately in the '80s, mid to late '80s. Wingers were not fashionable anymore, and it was hard for me
No.
to get a club because they
Mm,
wanted hard-working midfield players who could run up and down the park and fill in. And the unorthodox winger was being slowly pushed out because they didn't
yeah.
want entertainment. They wanted workers who could run up and down the field, and the unorthodox wingers are being left out of the game, and it hurt me,
Mm,
because Dad said, "Oh, coaching's killing it." And he always said, "Keep playing till your legs drop off," and that's what I did. I went from
yeah.
club to club because I love playing the game. And then when I retired, I ran the vets for 25 years, city vets, and I just wanted to keep playing until my legs dropped off.
Playing in the 70s, I'm surprised your legs didn't drop off while you was
Oh,
running up and down that
the
wing.
tackling. Oh, I know some of the
Absolutely.
tackles. I know.
If you could have a one-to-one a drink with anyone dead or alive, who would it be with and why?
Good question. I think Pele. Pele was
Yeah,
my idol. I think Pele, Brazil. What a player he was, and just to talk to him, what a wonderful freedom player he was. He could do anything with the ball, couldn't he, Pele?
he was the king,
Won all
wasn't
them. He was the king and won all them World Cups for Brazil. Oh yeah, with Pele probably. I think.
he? Talk to me about America, Tampa Bay Rowdies. What was it like there in the NASL?
I think with Rodney Marsh, he got as coach and he played for Tampa at the end of his career. And
Yeah,
the game was changed. I thought it was somewhere to go and take the family and live in a nice part of the world. But it was you play at Tampa Bay. It wasn't they didn't have the money in the game when I'd gone.
mm,
But you're playing at Tampa Bay Rowdies Buccaneers Stadium that held 80,000 people, and you'd only get 3,500, 4,000 crowds
yeah,
watching. So it was a bit of an anticlimax, and the standard wasn't very good. As probably when earlier Pele had gone and Franz Beckenbauer, when they had big sponsorships playing
mm,
in the 70s. And Trevor Francis went out there, and people where they're getting big gates. When I'd gone, in the 80s, 90s, it was small gates and not enough money in it. And you'd only play up the East Coast, of America. It wasn't national like it is today. So you'd only get Albany, Penn, New Jersey, Orlando. There's only about 10 teams in the first division, Paul. But it was a nice experience to live in a nice part of the world and play soccer. Soccer's a kick in the
yeah.
grass. But the standard wasn't very good.
It was
You
coming
know,
to an end, wasn't it? Because they
it was.
failed to bag the 1986 World Cup finals and they were struggling to get the television networks. And as a
Yeah,
consequence, it really died on its arse. But
you're right. And
we,
when you read the paper the next day about the game, it was all about baseball, ice
mm,
hockey. You get a little bit about your match on the back of the page, about an inch long, about an inch wide, 5 inches long, a little report about Tampa Bay's game. So
yeah,
there was a lack of sponsorship and of course the women's game was growing in America. A lot of girls played soccer, and it was getting, but they were lacking in marketing and sponsorship coming into the game like it did when Pele played and all those.
absolutely. What was your biggest if only moment when you look at your career, you look back and you think, a lot of people call them sliding doors moments, but me and Uddy always look at the if only. And every player has that If only I'd have
So
did that. If only that would have happened. What are those if only moments for Peter Barnes?
I don't know. I've had a very lucky career, and it was nice
Mm,
to have so many clubs and have a good career. Some great players never played for the country. I think players are it's easy to get caps today to play for your country,
yeah,
but in my day, you had to play well because you had competition. You know, I had Peter Taylor, Tony Morley, Laurie Cunningham, Gordon Hill, Man United, and David Fairclough. I had 5 or 6 players who were outside lefts
yeah,
trying to get me out of the team to play for England. Whereas you had to play well because otherwise you wouldn't get picked for England again. And you had competition where, and I think in my day you could pick 2 or 3 teams for England. Now
yeah, he could.
you're lucky you only pick one, and it's easy. Players get caps like willy-nilly today, don't they? You know, whereas in my day, if you play for your country, you know you're doing well because they didn't give caps out willy-nilly like they do today.
Absolutely. You must have visited loads and loads of countries, whether that be on tour or testimonials, because at the beginning of the season, it was like the hard work, the hard yards, if you like.
Yeah,
At the
yeah,
end of it, it was a glorified piss up, wasn't it? But
absolutely.
what countries do you remember from various tours that you went around the world with?
Yeah, I think Japan. You know, I went to, with Man City in '76 to Japan. Who'd have thought about going to
Yeah,
Japan? And it was a fantastic experience going to Tokyo and playing there against the Japan national team 3 times. We went to Hiroshima and on the bullet train in 1976.
good grief.
You know, 120-mile-an-hour bullet train, which is unheard of. That was a great experience. You know, and of course, I also went with Man United to Australia in '84-'5 when Ron Atkinson was manager. We went to Australia and Hong Kong, and that was a great tour playing at Melbourne and Sydney, Australia. But you know, it was just a very lucky career, really, to play for England youth, under 21s, full England. I did things that most players never do. I just probably wish I'd won more trophies. But, you know, I won one with League Cup final with City and scored a goal at Wembley. Some players in my day never got to Wembley and played at Wembley.
Absolutely. Any song or songs that evoke memories from your playing career, Peter?
Not really. I can't think of any at the moment.
Yeah.
Um, Sorry, Paul, I can't think of any at the moment.
If I could cast you back to a season that you played, what season would you like to go to revisit?
Maybe 76, 77,
Yeah,
because it was the last City team that probably played in Europe, even from this day. You know, we played AC Milan, we played Juventus in Europe, beat AC Milan in the San Siro Stadium, 77, playing against the great Riviera and the great Juventus team with
yeah.
Gentili, you know, Tardelli, Franco Causio, that team of Juventus. I'd say 77, 78 in Europe playing for Man City.
Some fantastic names and some fantastic clubs. And again, playing in Europe, it was different to playing in Europe
Yeah,
today. It
yeah.
was it was just, you play against those Italians. I mean, they were just. I mean, you look at
Oh,
international football now, Pete. I think it's in the worst state that it's
I
ever
do.
been.
I do. I'm not being, it's not sour
No,
grapes.
same here.
But I say, when I look at, you name any country, bro, it's Brazil, Italy, Germany,
Yeah,
England. You compare the teams of the '70s. Every team had 3 or 4, 5 technical gifted players.
yeah.
You know, you can't compare this Brazil team with the Brazil team of 1970, 74, 78. You know, or even the Argentinian team
Mm.
of Mario Kempes and Maradona, and you know the great players. Every team had 5 or 6 players who could change the game. Whereas now there's not a lack of individual players in each team, I think.
I think if you put the 1970 Brazil team up
Oh,
against the current Brazil team,
oh,
I think you could probably give them a 5 goal head start. And them boys now are in their 80s.
absolutely. You give them 5 start today. This team wouldn't
No,
get the ball off that old Brazil team.
not
No
at all.
way.
No.
Rivellino, Jairzinho, Tostao, you know, great players. Even Italy, Paolo Rossi and Bettiger and all that great team they had, Causio, Bettiger, Paolo Rossi.
Mm.
You know, every team had individual players, didn't they? Flair players, I call them.
I think they were always difficult teams to play. You go to Italy, you knew you were in for a battle, you'd be in for a fight, you're playing against great teams. And I just think everything's just so homogenised now. I think everything just
Yeah,
mingles into, and
and they all
every,
play the
like
same
say,
way,
mate,
Paul.
yeah, the
It's all
same.
fit.
Yeah,
It's all fitness and work rate
yeah,
today.
yeah.
Closing people down, getting back behind the ball,
Mm,
making it difficult to play. But there's no individual skill. I say to people now, there won't be another Paul. There won't be a Messi or Ronaldo again for another 50 years because
yeah.
they're not. They're not. We don't encourage skillful players to play with the ball and or being in. They say don't lose the ball, don't lose it. That's all you hear them say. Don't lose it. Well, you've got to try things, and Messi and Ronaldo. There won't be them. You don't see them players again coming through, do you?
No, it's a no risk game of football
That's
now.
it.
Don't play them
You're not allowed to
probing
dribble.
passes. No, not at
Yeah,
all. No,
don't dribble. You won't see another Messi and Ronaldo for a
no.
long, long time because they've coached that skill out of kids today. It's pass the ball, move, pass it, move. Where are the players coming through? A natural ability who can beat people and do things with the ball.
The flair is taken away from the
I
game,
think so.
and
I
it's
think
knocked
so.
out of kids. I'm sure it is. Is there a player or a club that you? I mean, you've played with some great clubs. You played with some fantastic players. But is there a player that you would have loved to have played with during your career, or a club that you would have loved to play for?
I think he might. He's just retired not long ago. David Silva, who played for
Yeah,
City, he was
great
a
player.
great player. Number
Yeah,
10.
yeah.
Yes, he could beat people, slow it down, pass the ball. David Silva, really. And probably you mentioned it. You gave me a question earlier. I was unlucky. I'm not knocking West Brom. I had 2 lovely years at West Brom, but
Mm,
I remember Tony Buck when he was a manager of City. He'd met Bob Paisley in Liverpool. Liverpool wanted to buy me when Steve Highway had a bad knee injury, who was another great winger for
he
Liverpool,
was.
Steve High.
Yeah.
And I was praying they'd met in Liverpool in a hotel, and I thought, oh, I'd walk up the M62 to play for that Liverpool team
Yeah.
of Souness and Dalglish and McDermott and Phil Neal and you know, and they were winning European Cups, Liverpool. I thought, well, if City don't want me, if I sign for Liverpool, but Bob Paisley said, well, we want Peter to come in, and they wouldn't offer more than 500,000, which was a lot of money in those days, But
Mm,
the deal broke down, and I ended up signing for West Brom, who came in with a cash offer because they'd sold Laurie Cunningham to Real Madrid for £1 million, who was trying to get in my, Laurie was my competitor to try and get in the England team, and they'd sold Laurie for £1 million to West Brom. Sorry, they'd sold Laurie for £1 million to Real Madrid, and they bought me for 650,000,
mm.
which is still a lot of money. But I thought if I'd signed for Liverpool, going there, I'd have had I know I would have had a trophy full of a cabinet full of trophies, Paul, in my house because they won everything in the 70s, didn't they?
I mean, again, we're not being
It's bad luck.
disrespectful to
No, to
West
West
Bromwich
Brom,
Albion
I'm
Football
not.
Club,
I'm not.
but if you have got the chance to play for that great Liverpool team
Oh,
of
the
the
70s.
70s or
Oh,
or the Albion, it is an absolute no-brainer. And to play, again, I always say this, it takes a special kind of player to play for a Liverpool or a Manchester United. How
yeah,
did you find it when you went to sign for United, Peter? Because when
yeah,
you're playing for other teams, yeah, great. Like my team, Birmingham City, brilliant. But when
yeah,
you're there, you're in the spotlight. It's almost so you must be in a goldfish bowl. The media, everything is on you
yeah.
24/7. It takes special player to be able to conduct
Yeah,
themselves under that
and I
their
think being a
conditions.
Manchester lad,
Mm,
I think what was good for me, the City fans never forgave me going back to United, but it was a contract, and
yeah,
Ron Atkinson was there. He bought me, and he'd been my manager at West Brom. I thought going to that team, and the thing was for me, I was wearing the number 11 shirt for Manchester
yeah,
United, playing in George Best's outside left for Manchester United.
yeah.
That was a dream to go back to United and play. Wasn't my team. I was a City fan as a kid, but just to
Mm,
play outside left, wearing number 11, where George Best played was a great kick for me.
yeah.
You had to, when you cross that white line at Old Trafford, you knew you had to. Good players can do it. You're playing an arena with Brian Robsons and Frank Stapletons and Mark Hughes, and that team also in '85, which I joined, went 11 points clear by November. They should have won the league that year,
Yeah.
and I think that was Ron's only regret is that Liverpool came from the bottom and won the title. But if Ron would have won the league that year, I think he could have signed another 5-year contract because they'd not won the league title for 29 years. I think it was United,
Mm,
and it was the big thing they wanted to win was the title, and it was a great team to play with Strachan and Robson and Hughes, Alan Brazil, Stapleton, Moran, McGrath, Alberson, and Duxbury at the back, and it was a great attacking-minded side to play in as well.
As a player, did that shirt feel heavier at United? And when I say obviously the material is the same weight, but you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Did you feel that weight of expectation, and given at Man United that they hadn't won, the league for such a long time, and you look at the past glories of the Babes, etc., etc., it's.
I think it was a history, that got you at it. But for me, I'd been brought up on that history of Best Law, Charlton. So it was like I could pinch myself to go on that pitch outside left and play for United. Even though I was a Blue, but I was a massive George Best fan, as every kid was in those days growing up. It was nice to wear his shirt outside left and play in the same position as George Best, my idol. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. What's the most prized possession that you got from your playing days?
I think I'm looking up at it now in my house. I think the Young Player of the Year award, Paul. Because to be voted as a kid coming through, the best player in the country at 18 years of age, and just scoring the goal at Wembley the day before, that gives me great pleasure. And also my first England game, getting the cap for England at 18, 19, against Italy, who were one of the best teams in the world at the time. And I got great reports the next day because I gave Claudio Gentili a hard time again.
Yeah. And finally, Peter, if you wasn't a football player, what do you think you would have been?
I don't think any of us have a clue.
No, we didn't, did we?
We didn't have a clue because all you wanted to be was a player.
Yeah.
Probably a doctor or something like that, or a bus driver. But I mean, you never dreamt, did you? When you were a kid, every kid wanted to be a professional football player.
Yeah.
And to do that, I was very lucky and very proud that, there's only me and my dad who did it for City, and he won the FA Cup and I won the League Cup. I don't think a father and son have ever won 2 trophies like that for the same club. Not at City, anyway.
No. Peter, it's been an absolute joy and a pleasure taking that trip down memory lane and reminiscing about the halcyon days of the golden age of football.
Thanks, Paul. It's been nice talking to you and a pleasure to speak to you as well.
Lovely. Cheers, pal. Thanks, Peter. Thanks for your time.
Bye, Paul. All the best. Bye-bye.
Lovely. Thank you.
Bye-bye, mate.
Thanks for listening, guys.